Hello everyone, I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's webinar, DAT Resources and Study Habits, presented by the American Student Dental Association. We'd like to thank our generous sponsor, the American Dental Association. In addition to several other ASDA events, the ADA has sponsored Predental Month for 4 straight years. The ADA is committed to its members and to the improvement of oral health for the public. Please be sure to visit ada.org for more information. Before we get started, a few housekeeping items. All attendees are muted so that we don't pick up any background noise during the program. The webinar will be recorded and posted on ASDA's website, and a link will be emailed to all who have registered for the webinar next week. You'll notice a control panel on the right side of your screen. You can type your question into the screen and it'll be added to a queue. The Q&A portion of the webinar will take place at the very end. My name is Brian Jones. I'm ASDA's Membership Development Manager. I'll be serving as the facilitator for tonight's program. ASDA has a staff of 14 association professionals in our central office located in Chicago. I've worked for ASDA for 2 years, and my main responsibility is creating and managing initiatives to increase predental membership and engagement in ASDA. I'd now like to introduce our presenters. Nick Sung is the Manager of Test Administration in the Department of Testing Services at the American Dental Association, where he has worked for 10 years. The Test Administration Unit is responsible for processing applications, providing information to candidates, ensuring smooth test delivery, and disseminating score results. DTS administers over 40,000 tests per year. Carson Smith is a senior at the University of Florida pursuing a dual degree in nutritional sciences and microbiology. He currently serves as the predental consultant to ASDA. His hobbies include all things predental, running, and completing secondaries. Clark Oki is currently obtaining his MBA at Texas Tech University after obtaining his MS degree in biology from the University of Tulsa. He's a member of the Predental Advisory Committee. When he isn't playing with his dog, he loves playing rugby and running triathlons. Shelley Johannesson is a graduate of East Tennessee State University with a bachelor's degree in biology. She aspires to be a dentist and eventually an owner of a nonprofit dental clinic. She's been a member of ASDA for 3 years and currently serves as a Predental Advisory Committee member. In her spare time, she enjoys reading, painting, and backpacking. I will now turn over the webinar to our first presenter, Nick Sung.
All right, thank you, Brian. So I am going to walk you guys through the resources that the ADA makes available for students who are taking the DAT, and then I'm going to go through some of the common problems that I think students run into from an ADA perspective, and then finally I'll be going through some of the things that I've picked up over the years. As Brian said, I've been working for the ADA in the Department of Testing Services for 10 years. So I've talked to a lot of candidates and heard from them a lot of stories about what worked for them, or more often what did not work for them. And so I'll be sharing some of the common tips that I've picked up through those conversations. So the first place that I would recommend anyone taking the DAT start is reading through the DAT guide. It is a short book that goes through all of the rules for the test, as well as the steps to taking the test, from submitting the application to what you can expect with the reporting of your scores. In terms of studying, what will probably be the most helpful in the guide is the test specifications, where it breaks down within each section what is going to be covered on the DAT itself. And this can give you an idea of what you feel comfortable with, what you don't feel comfortable with, and what you feel like you need to improve upon. In tandem with that, the ADA also makes available a list of reference texts. These are textbooks that we have found through surveys are commonly used throughout the country the undergrad institutions to teach the subjects that are going to appear on the DAT. And that is listed, all of this is listed on the DAT website, ada.org/DAT, and it's under the test preparation section. There is also a tutorial that will walk you through how the test functions on the computers at the test centers. It appears at the beginning of the test when you start your appointment, but I think it's a good idea to get a sense of how the test will function before you actually sit down to take it. We also make available both sample questions and a sample test. The sample questions are not a full version of the DAT. It's just questions to give you a sense of how the different formats of the questions will appear in the various sections. There is also a sample test that is offered either in a downloadable PDF or in an online version. If you get the downloadable PDF, it includes the answers in the back, and you can go through it at your leisure. If you do the online version, it is the same test as the downloadable PDF, but it will be presented to you on your computer as it will be presented at the test center, including the test timings. You don't get a score for either one of them, and you don't get to know what questions you got wrong from the one done online. You can do that with the downloadable PDF. As I said, the answers appear in the back of that version of the practice test. We are currently working on new versions of a practice test for the DAT. So depending on when you plan on taking the test, you may be able to take advantage of those. We expect that they will be available by the middle of December at the latest, and it will be a full version of the test, but also you can take it in sections. So if you just want to practice the perceptual ability, you'll be able to just get the perceptual ability rather than having to do the entire test, and the price will be different depending on how many, we're calling them modules, of the DAT you do. And you can check on ada.org/DAT for updates about that. As soon as we know exactly when the new tests will be going, practice tests will be going live, we will be sure to post it on there. So this is related to the problems that we find people encounter. It's not as common anymore. I think hopefully the word has gotten out, but sometimes we have people who don't show up with sufficient identification to take the test. And so, as it says there, you need to bring a primary ID, which is government issued, that has your picture, name, and signature, and then a secondary ID that just needs to have your name and signature. That can be almost anything: a credit card, a library card, and then that must match the name you gave us when you signed up for your DENT PIN. And it is still fairly common that people will access their locker during unscheduled breaks during the test, and it is generally that they are doing something completely innocuous, getting water or a snack, or just checking their phone or whatever while they are taking the test. But if we can't tell that you're not cheating, it could be easy for us to make the assumption that you were, and then your scores could be voided, and there may be other penalties. The one in the bottom right is also fairly important. If you experience that something is going wrong with your test, whether you feel that the mouse isn't working properly, whether you feel it's going slow moving from one question to another, anything that you think may be going wrong with your test, be sure to report it to someone immediately so that they can try to rectify it, and do not continue taking the test unless the issue has been rectified to your satisfaction. If it is not resolved, email testingproblems@ada.org, as it says there, as soon as possible, so that we can work with you to remedy the situation. It happens sometimes that people are so worried about the time that they have, since you don't get a significant amount of time per question, that they won't report the technical issues that are going on until the end of the test, which means that the test center not only didn't get a chance to fix it, but they didn't get a chance to see it. And if we cannot confirm with the test center that the issue you are giving us actually occurred, it makes it difficult for us to bring any resolution. So I would keep all of those things in mind. Something that has come up recently is an issue with the review screen for the test. We recently changed it so that there is a button that will take you to the review screen. At any point in the test, you can click review, and that will take you to a screen that looks something like what is on the slide in front of you. On that screen, there is a button that says end, and we have had people who click review either on purpose or not, and then they think to get back to the question they had been on previously, they should click end. But you should not click end. If you click end, it'll bring up a pop-up that says you're about to exit the section, and you will not be able to go back. So if you find yourself on the review screen, whether you did it on purpose or you did it inadvertently, and you need to go back to where you were in the section, you just click on the question that you need to go back to, double click, and it will bring you back to where you were in the test. So do not click end unless you are intentionally exiting out of that section. Just be aware you will not be able to go back and answer any questions that were incomplete at that time. So this is a breakdown of the different resources that the ADA makes available and that are available through Prometric. The guide and the frequently asked questions are all on the DAT website, as well as information about getting testing accommodations, what to do on test day. That's the testing checklist, the tutorial, and the practice tests that I talked about earlier. And then Prometric also has their own FAQs. They have a walkthrough of what you can expect when you show up at the test center. They also have the practice test and the tutorial that walks you through how the test functions on their computer. And so in terms of study tips, the ADA does not endorse any of the third-party study materials or courses that are available, or the practice tests that they offer. This is not to say that they're not helpful. We just can't endorse any of them because they did not work with us to develop any of that materials, and so we would not want to endorse any one of them over any other because we also can't comment on how effective they are. It has not been as much of an issue recently, but we did previously encounter a number of students who were doing things while taking the test that they had been told to do by a third-party company that had helped them study for the test, and those things were actually against the rules. They had told them to write down on their note boards before the test started anything they wanted to remember while going through the test, and it is against the rules for the test to write anything on your note boards unless there's actually questions on the screen. So if you do make use of any of the third-party companies that offer help with the DAT, do make sure that you go through the DAT guide and all other information on the ADA website to make sure that the information they are giving you is accurate. If there is anything you have questions about, don't hesitate to reach out to us for clarification. I would also reiterate that the practice tests we offer are not intended to help you get a better score on the test necessarily. They're more to help you familiarize yourself with how the test looks, what the different question formats are, and sort of how the different subjects covered will appear on the test. We recommend that you use those as supplements to the other studying that you're doing. The expectation is that you will have taken classes in the subjects that are covered on the test, and so what we recommend as your primary tools for studying are the textbooks and class notes. And as it says here at the bottom, there is no magic formula for getting a good score on the DAT other than knowing the material and being able to bring it to bear in a standardized testing format. The reason I really stress making sure that you are aware of how the test will work through the tutorial, as well as familiarizing yourself with the rules, is the last part there that I feel like it is extremely important for students taking the test to feel confident and relaxed while they're taking the test. I think if you're feeling anxious, it can really affect your focus. And anything that happens to you while you're taking the test or before you take the test when you're checking in that you were not expecting can make you anxious, and I think that affects people's scores a lot of times. So these are the recommendations that I make to people when they ask how they should best prepare themselves. As I said, review the test specifications to identify your areas of strength and weaknesses. I would certainly, if you can, work with teachers or advisors in coming up with how you should study for the areas you do not feel weak in, and then make a plan. I often am asked how long someone should study for the test, and I recommend, based on what students have told me, 10 to 12 weeks of dedicated study before you go to take the DAT. Some people may need less than that, some people may need more, but I think it's important to sit down and make a plan so that you know how much you have to study in the lead up to your test to feel comfortable with the subjects that are covered. As I said, know the rules so you don't find yourself inadvertently in violation of any of them, because it could end up with your scores being voided and some retest penalties. A big one is I am often asked by people what they should do to get a better score if they have to retake the test. And all I can suggest is, unless you really felt like there was an area that you were particularly weak in, where you just did not know the material, you really have to do something different. If you did not feel like you did very poorly in any section of the test and you still didn't get the score you wanted, just doing more of the same to study probably is not going to improve your score. I have seen a lot of times people just study the same material they had been studying and get almost the exact same score. The test is highly reliable and is validated on an ongoing basis. The notion of validity and reliability is that we are measuring what we're purporting to measure, but also that it is an accurate measure of people's abilities. So unless you change your ability level, work to change your ability level in the sections where you didn't score as well as you want, you should expect that you will get the same score. And then the last one I think is key, just to your stress level. Make sure that you give yourself enough time. If you come up with a plan that requires 10 weeks of studying leading up to the DAT, don't wait until 4 weeks before the test to actually start going through all of the things you plan to study, or you'll be stressed out, and I anticipate that you will not score as well. Those were all of the slides I had to share. I will give it back to you, Brian.
Thank you, Nick. So thanks everybody for joining us for the DAT Resources and Strategies webinar. Today, myself and my colleagues Clark and Carson will be talking a little bit about test-taking tips and strategies. So a little overview of our day. We're going to go over study strategies. We're going to review some popular study resources, and we are also going to review some testing strategies. So I'll start off with the study strategies. I love this quote, "Failing to plan is planning to fail." So first of all, you want to learn to perfect your time management. And it's crucial that you put a lot of time into studying for the DAT, but be sure to allow yourself time to do other things that you love. If you're studying whilst in school, or if you have a job, you're going to benefit from developing a habit of planning now. For me, I sit down in front of my desk every Sunday night and I plan for the entire week. So having a schedule laid out in front of you is going to help the stress. It's going to help the stress of important staying on track. Sorry here. You're going to want to prioritize your time and don't procrastinate. The secret to getting ahead is getting started. Learn to put important and urgent tasks before completing tasks that aren't as time sensitive. And lastly, set realistic goals. Yeah, we would all love to be able to sit down and study for 12 hours straight, but make sure you're honest with yourself about how much you're able to accomplish in your day. So if you plan on allotting all day and every day to studying for the DAT, make sure you take a couple of breaks so you don't wear yourself out. And based on your preferences, develop a schedule and be sure to be consistent with it. If you want to study one subject all day or study a little of each subject all day is completely up to you. But I would recommend aiming to do at least one practice test each day before you do a review of your notes. And as your test approaches, try to designate every few days to taking a full-length practice test. If you do schedule off days or you have not as much time in a day for studying, a PAT and a reading comprehension tests are great, quick 1-hour tests to do on an off day, and they don't really take much preparation for. Most importantly, adjust your schedule based on your needs. Don't make a schedule in the beginning of your time to study and then absolutely stick to it. Make sure you adjust it based on how you're doing on your practice tests. So by now, you should know what strategies fit you the best, and you should probably have a good grasp on what type of learner you are. There's tons of materials out there, which we're going to review shortly, but stick to the study habits that you know. If you're a visual learner, you may prefer to watch videos and draw diagrams or pictures as a form of note-taking. And if you're more of an auditory learner, listen to videos and don't be afraid to talk to yourself. Most of us learn to recall information more effectively if we say it out loud. And finally, if you're a kinesthetic learner like me and you just can't sit still, you may find it most helpful to take notes, highlight these notes, and summarize the ideas by putting sticky notes literally everywhere. Not every review material will be right for you, and just keep in mind that as we go through the review materials later, that this is based on our opinions and what our friends liked, but we're not endorsing any specific review material, and we urge you to find a few of them that you really like and stick with those. In this case, quality really defeats quantity, so rather than trying to read everything you possibly can, be sure to take your time with each concept and master it. This is especially important in the biology section, which covers literally every subject imaginable. So it's really important to know how a system works or how a plant develops throughout evolution rather than knowing just a bunch of random facts. So although it's more time consuming to dig into the concepts and to really study like you would for one biology class, it's going to work out for you in the end when you need to use deductive reasoning in answering these conceptual questions. In addition, reading up on these biological concepts and taking ideas in random articles online are going to improve your reading comprehension skills. So in the end, you're studying for 2 subjects at the same time, and you can't go wrong with that. Don't try to use every possible resource out there because it's just going to be way too overwhelming. If you find a study guide and not everything on that study guide fits your study style, then customize it to your liking. When summarizing large ideas and studying, I like to use the Cornell system. This is a fairly new way of note-taking, but if you look at the diagram on the right, you can see that, first of all, you would take notes as you watch videos or read book in section C, and then after that, you would use section A as a Q column to connect the ideas. You would jot down any questions you have or any questions that have challenged you during taking practice tests. And lastly, B, the summary area. That's where you would summarize your notes in your own words and develop useful mnemonics and write them here. So right before you take your test, maybe 2 weeks ahead of time, this is a great way to really summarize everything that you've learned throughout this journey. So after a practice test, it's really important to write down the concepts that you're missing. Use this list as a guide of what you should be reviewing. And find those concepts in your notes and add a quick notation elaborating these ideas. Stick a sticky note on there, highlight something, and really dig into those ideas and find out why you got it wrong and learn more about it. And review every question, whether you get it right or wrong, because you want to make sure that you're familiar with every answer choice. So even if you get a question right and you know why you got it right, be familiar with every single answer, because these are the subjects and these are the types of ideas that they're questioning you on the DAT. So this will just broaden your area of knowledge. And on the real exam, if you're not sure, knowing what everything means is going to help you when you start to use process of elimination. And my biggest piece of advice would be to take as many practice exams as possible. This is the best way to prepare for the real DAT. It is crucial that you take a practice exam in the setting that you would in the real test. So go to the library and sit in a cubicle. Make sure that you don't have any distractions. Maybe even use a desktop computer like you would in the real test with a mouse and a keyboard. Just bring, one whiteboard and study that way. Take the test that way. That way you're not thrown off when you go into this testing center and you feel so awkward. It's important, though, that you don't let these practice exams consume your study time. I had to take the DAT twice, and the first time I was so focused on taking practice tests that I forgot to really take a break and just review the information that I needed to review. I was just so adamant about getting better and getting better that I wasn't doing anything to get better. So it's very important that you review every day and continue learning. And if you're not performing as well as you'd like, just step back for a few days and study and then hit it again. Now, I'm going to pass it on.
Hello, everybody. My name's Carson, and I'll be sharing with you some of the popular study resources we've all encountered. Like Shelley shared, we will not be endorsing any product today. We'll be sharing the different strengths of each, and it's really important that you find what works best for you. So we're going to start out with the 3 different resources that ASDA provides discounts for as a predental member. So the first one being Memorang, which is a newer study resource that is basically available either through iPhone or on your computer. It combines 4,500 facts focused into 115 different focused study sets. And that really just allows you to, one, figure out maybe where your weaknesses lie and study those extra, but then also these study materials can be placed into note card, question format, or even games to make learning a little bit more fun. These questions were actually created by dental school students who scored exceptionally high on the DAT, and they're based on material from the Cliffs, AP, McGraw-Hill, and Kaplan books. So I think some of the strengths of this system is that it's really customizable. You don't need to spend time memorizing something that you may already know. And it's newly created, so I think it's more accurate probably, because that's something that you're going to run into sometimes with materials, is that if they're 10 years old, well, the standards for what questions might be on the exam might have changed in the past 10 years. The next one is one that I know is really popular. It's called Chad's Videos, and it's hosted by Coursesaver, which is another one of the resources that ASDA provides a discount for. It's a monthly subscription fee, and basically Chad, as pictured here on the slide, provides over 30 hours of science content that relates back to the DAT. So these 30 hours of lecture cover pretty much every topic in general chemistry and organic chemistry. Additionally, he has some videos for the different review tests available within biology and quantitative reasoning to go over those questions. Our next resource is Crack the DAT, another one of ASDA's discount resources with a 10% discount. This one's a little bit pricier, but it does allow you to customize your options. So there's 3 different levels, starting out with the starter pack, the pro pack, and the hero. With each of these levels, you're increasing the length of time that you can access the material, as well as the number of practice exams and full-length exams that are available to you. So the numbers that I've provided to you here are based on the HERO review, which gives you 10 full-length practice exams, 10 PAT-based exams, 10 reading, 10 natural sciences, and 20 quantitative reasoning. Additionally, with every question, there's a video explanation explaining the correct answer and why it's correct, and the wrong answers and why they are wrong. It allows you to estimate your DAT score, and it provides comprehensive score reports into what you're continually missing. It also comes with the pre-made study guides, which can be a great help if you have some free time and you just want to study for maybe 10-20 minutes. With Crack the DAT, it's pretty well known for PAT practice, and what they actually have is a PAT question generator. And so you can just log in and hit the PAT generator, and it will generate questions randomly of the different types of PAT questions you will encounter on the test. And PAT, for those who don't know, it stands for the Perceptual Ability Test, and that tests your ability to see 3D objects in 2D and 2D objects in 3D. The next one's a really popular one, and it's on the pricier end, but it's the Kaplan review. Kaplan provides this review in 3 different formats. You can do it self-paced online, you can do it through a live online class that you attend, or you can do it through a live in-person class that you may attend. There's 12 lectures, and it comes with 2 different books, a full-length lesson book that covers a lot of the material, and then a review book that has questions in it for you to practice. Throughout the course, there's 5 full-length practice exams that simulate the real environment. And additionally, this comes with pre-made study sheets and note cards that are also great to assess your knowledge. The strengths I would state Kaplan has is that it's really comprehensive, and it has realistic exam questions, interface, and scoring. Something as you're looking into reviewing for the DAT, definitely check out to see if there's any discounts available. Kaplan is really great with discounts. They'll allow you to combine multiple coupon codes, and they'll regularly do sales during the holiday seasons or even leading up to the summer when a lot of people are looking into different courses to buy. So you can combine those discounts. Also, Kaplan has a program that your pre-dental club, if you're involved in one, may be interested in joining, and basically that offers different discounts to your members, officers, as well as the possibility of getting a free course to give away as an organization. The next one is the DAT Destroyer, which are sets of books created by a dentist, and these books can cost anywhere from $150 to $400 depending on which books you purchase. There's 4 books total, and so these different books target the different types of questions you'll see on the exam and provide step-by-step solutions. These are known for being more challenging, but with that being said, are respected in terms of if you really want a phenomenal score, you need to probably check into the DAT Destroyer to help you. Additionally, Feralis Notes are a free resource that are available online. Feralis Notes were written by a current dental student, and it's a review of the Cliffs AP Bio book. And so these are downloadable from the DAT Bootcamp website, which is another review company. With that being said, I checked today, and these Feralis Notes are currently down. But once they become available again, as they consistently update them, it's about 40 pages of review. And I know I personally went through these because it's just biology based, and I annotated the whole study guide and read it twice, and I think that really helped me as it's a comprehensive guide to a lot of the biology concepts, as well as being free. Another thing on the DAT Bootcamp website is RE's study schedule, which was created by another dental student and the owner of DAT Bootcamp. This DAT study schedule is a 10-week guide that basically lays it out day by day. An example of maybe what your schedule should look like, whether or not you choose to decide to follow that. The guide itself is free, but it's going to rely on resources that may cost you money. And so we have an example here on the right where it says week 1, day 1, it gives you a list of things to complete. And so if you're the type of person that maybe has a hard time writing out a schedule for yourself or deciding what to do, this might come in handy to give you some ideas on what you should be doing daily. One of my other tips for you is to check out Student Doctor Network. If you don't know what Student Doctor Network is, you're going to learn about it really quickly. And basically, it's a resource for different doctors to come together to provide feedback to each other. There's actually a whole section devoted to dentistry, and within that, a whole section devoted to the DAT, where people are consistently discussing different reviews, different test-taking techniques, and really providing maybe free resources. So I encourage you to check that out to learn more about what you can be doing as you prepare for the DAT. And so with that being said, there are a ton of free resources. I know it's probably scary to look at these price tags involved with a lot of these resources, but there's always places that you can look, whether it be a released previous DAT exam. A lot of the different companies may put out one or two practice DAT exams. You can go and check out AP exams for more practice. You can consider MCAT exams, but with MCAT exams, understand that maybe the material might differ from the DAT. You can always check into your school's library. The Feralis Notes, once again, are a great place to look for biology. If you're a visual learner, check into Khan Academy or Leah for Sci. MCAT tutorials provides a ton of different resources to help you learn a lot of the information that's on the MCAT that also shows up on the DAT. Also, there's the Bozeman Science website, which provides lectures that you can listen to if you're maybe more of an auditory learner. And then with that being said, the Kaplan Prep Company provides practice DAT exams throughout the year. And so these are a little bit more abbreviated and kind of give you a ballpark of where you stand in terms of the Kaplan content. And so the next one's actually is this week on October 12th from 7:30 to 11:30. But I would say they have one of these every couple months. So as you get prepared to study for the DAT, this might be something you might want to look out for. So there are 3 different discounts offered by ASDA Predental to our members. And so here are the 3 that I've discussed earlier with Memorang, Coursesaver, and Crack the DAT. And so they each have their own way of going about getting the discount. And so you'll want to check on the website to figure out how you can get those discounts. These discounts are updated periodically as the partnerships are evaluated to make sure we're providing the best resources to our members. So with that being said, I'm going to pass this on to Clark, who's going to be sharing more about the DAT and some strategies we can use as we take the test.
Thanks, Carson. Okay, so essentially, like Carson said, I'm going to be talking about testing strategies today and kind of how to tackle the test once we actually get into the test. So the important thing to remember here as I talk about some of these points is that we've gone through this whole time. We've taken all these classes during our college education and high school education. We've put the hours into study, and now it's time to perform on the tests, crucially the most important part and where we need to be the most successful at. So the first one that's bolded there is time management. Like I said, we spent all this time, whether it be months, weeks, days, hundreds of hours studying and going through all this different material, sitting through all these different classes. Having all the information and understanding all those complex topics is great, but if we're not able to manage our time and manage our time efficiently on the test, that's going to be a huge struggle for us. The test comprises a total of 5 hours and 15 minutes. Now that being said, there are 2 15-minute optional sections in that test that we can rule out if we don't want to. That's a introductory 15 minutes where we go through different types of questions that will be shown to us, how the software actually works, how the testing program runs. I would advise you to, before you take the test, familiarize yourself with that on the Prometric website or on the available resources to you. Familiarize yourself with the questions so that you don't have to go through that portion on test day. It's just one more thing to add stress to you. So you can kind of cut out that 15 minutes of your time sitting in the test chair. Likewise, there's a 15-minute post-test section, which usually isn't required either. If you do cut out those 2 sections, your test ultimately will come down to 4 hours and 15 minutes with a 30-minute optional break halfway through. I'll talk more about that in a few slides here, but I would highly recommend taking that break, whether you use the full 30 minutes or not. That's up to you and what you personally feel you need, but I would highly recommend it. So if you do use part of that 30-minute break, that cuts your time down to 4 hours and 45 minutes total, which is a long time to take a test. So you've got to realize that you've got to be kind of in marathon mode. You've got to be willing to go the whole time as strong as you can and not give up. So kind of taking those practice tests beforehand will condition you for that good time management. On that same vein, understanding how much time you have for each question and for each section specifically will help you succeed to a greater degree. So for example, for the science section, or the survey of natural sciences, you have to answer 100 questions in 90 minutes, which comes out to about 54 seconds per question, give or take. Now obviously there'll be some questions that will only take us maybe 10, 20, 30 seconds, and there'll be some questions that maybe take us a full minute and a half, or 2 minutes even. I know, especially for myself, OChem questions always took me a little bit longer than the biology questions did. But so understanding how much time we have per questions allows us to understand kind of the rate of answering and the rate of our solutions that we need to go through as we clip along. So as I mentioned, survey of natural sciences, you'll have about 54 seconds per question. The PAT, the perceptuability, you'll have about 40 seconds per question. Then you'll have your 30-minute break. And then during reading comprehension, you'll be given 3 passages, and you'll have about 72 seconds per break. So that one, they give you a little bit more time. But that being said, you do have to read a lot more in that one, so that is the reason why they give you more time. And to finish off in the quantitative section, you have around 67 seconds per question. So as I mentioned, understanding how much time you have and how to regulate your time will ultimately save you a lot of grief and will help you improve your score significantly. I think that's a big thing that people get caught up on is the timing. So definitely make sure you, as was mentioned earlier, set up those scenarios where you take the full-length test or full-length sections and you time yourself and make sure you understand where you're weak at on your timing. That being said, in some sections, skipping to what you know and skipping questions will help you a lot. If you come to a question where you start to struggle and you realize that maybe you spent already 30, 40, 50 plus seconds on a question, I would suggest you either mark it and move on or answer it and move on. Moving to what we know and we can answer quickly will help us save time so that we have time on the back end to go back and review questions we had to guess on or we had to mark, because that will ultimately be the ones that we don't want to waste our time and sink our time into. So don't waste your time on questions that you don't know the answer to. Just mark it either to come back to or just make an educated guess and come back to it. And that being said, let's not leave any questions blank, because all questions help, and guessing sometimes gets us the right answer. One test-taking strategy that I see, or I've heard a lot of students get tripped up on, or I've seen some of my fellow classmates get tripped up on, is being comfortable with that calculator. I know this only comes up during the quantitative section, but understanding how to use that calculator and what type of functions you're going to be allowed to use in the calculator will help you significantly. So the best advice I can give for preparing how to use that and how to attack the quantitative section with the calculator, first of all, improve your mental math, be able to do math quickly in your head or by hand, quickly on the whiteboard. My second advice would be to just practice using your phone calculator, because you're going to only be allowed those basic functions of addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. Or if you have a MacBook, I know for sure you can pull up on the calculator and it has the exact same small functions. And using it on your laptop is a little bit better because you kind of get used to that situation where you're going to be having a calculator on a computer screen that doesn't have a number key that can go with it. So you have to really get used to using the mouse and moving it quickly and working quickly through problems on that. The best way to attack the testing strategy is to evaluate the different sections. Now, initially, before we dive into that small picture on the right-hand side of the slide there is exactly what you'll be given on test day. I know for myself, I have my own whiteboard table at home, which is what I use to do all my problems or work through anything I have. But on test day, we're just going to be giving we're going to give you 2 small sheets that are laminated, and we're giving them whiteboard markers to write on them with. You're not supposed to erase it with your own, spit or whatever you have available to you. But if you do need more tests or more boards, you can just raise your hand and they'll bring you more to you. There are several different methods to dividing the whiteboard up, numbering it different sections. If you're someone who likes to be really organized, I suggest you divide it up and kind of make a plan of attack on your whiteboard. If you're fine with things kind of being a little bit erratic and just working where you need to, I wouldn't waste the time in writing on the whiteboard. That's kind of a personal preference thing, however you like to work your materials. But try to get a hold of one of those. There's several different ways you can get a hold of one of those whiteboards and practice with it. Get used to writing on it, get used to writing small, get used to writing with a whiteboard and marker, just so when it comes time you can work those problems efficiently and you won't be thrown when you're given that whiteboard, which is different from a piece of paper or a notebook, which you may have used previously before. Just a few sort of test-taking strategies that I picked up over the years and that I've seen several other students have success with that aren't specifically listed on this slide are using a couple different strategies. And the first one would be the no or the maybe strategy. This is taught generally to most high school students that are taking the ACT or the SAT, but this is when we're evaluating answer choices. We look at all of our options, A, B, C, D, E, and we want to go through quickly and decide which ones are plausible options and which ones are totally out of the ballgame. So using that no or maybe strategy, where if we know that A is definitely not an option or not available, we strike it through or we mark no next to it. Whereas if we get to B and we are maybe think it could be possible, but we're not 100% sure yet, we can put maybe next to it. And essentially, you want to cut down your answer choices down until all you have left is maybe options. And then you can start to make your educated guess. Now, I would recommend this strategy more so if we get to a question where we really struggle, or maybe we're having a hard time recalling the information that we need to answer the question efficiently. But it'll definitely save you if you're struggling and you just have to make a whole-out guess. Try to use the no or maybe strategy. Another strategy that I think is very efficient is if you're given multiple choice options that have values in numerical order. So, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you are a little confused, start to use some of your numbers or values and plug them back into the question. So, for example, if you plug option D in and D ends up being too high, then you know option E is not going to be correct because E is a higher value. Likewise, if you have option B and you plug that into your question or equation and you realize that it is too low, then you know option A is no longer valid either because A is a lower number. As I mentioned, the numbers or the values have to go in numerical order. So start to use some of those educated guesses and try to pick off answers in the most efficient way possible. PAT strategies are a big one where most students usually want to hear about, or mostly want to hear how to succeed in that. I think a lot of that comes down to, actually I talked about your personal learning style and how you best understand the PAT questions that are being shown to you. Some of the good ones that I found success with were, for example, like the angle ranking, using your hand or the whiteboard to cover part of the top part of the angles to see if you can see what type of angles are smaller or larger comparatively. That also being said, when it comes to angle ranking, there is another trick you can use, which is to evaluate the numbers that are shown to you. So if, for example, you see that all the answers end in angle 4, for example, then you know angle 4 definitely has to be the biggest, and that you can rule that out. Or if 2 of the 4 questions say angle 4 is the biggest, and the other 2 questions say angle 3 is the biggest, all you have to evaluate is between angle 3 and 4. You can forget about 1 and 2 because you know 3 and 4 are going to be one of the two. Either one is going to be the biggest angle. And once you narrow that down to either 3 or 4, then you can start to work backwards and see which one's the smallest one. So try to use kind of those strategies like that to evaluate the angle ranking section. Some of the other ones, the paper filling one with the hole punching. Specifically, I've seen a lot of students make their own hole punch and try to work through it as they go through, and then kind of sort of wean themselves off having the piece of paper in front of them, and sort of really, after they've gotten good at doing it with their hands, they can start to do it with their minds and work backwards as well. Using keyhole, someone once told me the best way to imagine every keyhole problem is to think about a can of Coke. If you slammed a can of Coke into a wall, it would scrunch it flat. So depending on if you looked at it long ways, right, it would make sort of a square. And if you looked at it on the other end, it would make a circle at the end. So kind of think with that in mind as you're going through all the keyhole questions, thinking about if you took this shape and you smashed it against a wall flat, what would the shape ultimately end up looking like? And there are several other resources, like Carson mentioned, where you can get more test-taking strategies. For anyone who's taken the ACT or SAT or any sort of prep courses for those, a lot of the same strategies that were used to answer those types of questions would also be successful on the DAT. Something like that will definitely save you. A point I just want to make sure as we're thinking about testing strategy is navigating the testing center. And I think Nick did a great job explaining some of the things that will be shown to you on test day. But the testing center at Prometric is a little bit different than anything personally I had experienced before. If you've ever taken any sort of graduate or professional test, you may have already had some exposure to these for-profit testing centers. But they definitely run things a little bit different than your high school class, or even your college testing center possibly. As Nick mentioned, you'll need 2 valid forms of ID, and you'll have to be going through a biometric scanner, which will test your fingerprints. You'll take a picture to prove it's you. I just want everyone to make sure that they have a good grasp of what's going to be expected of them on testing day. I know some students don't really prepare adequately for the testing center experience itself, and it kind of throws them a little bit because it's a different environment. It's very professional, very well run, but it's a little bit different environment than just showing up to take a test. You have to go through a long process to get into the test actually, and then it's kind of a very strict set of rules once you're into the test. Like Nick mentioned, you don't want to do anything that could jeopardize your test score or put you in a situation where you may not receive the best score possible. one area that I was a little inexperienced with myself, and I'm embarrassed to say, is when it comes to your break time, make sure you understand that as you leave the testing center, you're going to have to go through the exact same process that you did to get into the testing center when you leave the room and come back into the room. So being prepared to go through that process efficiently and quickly will help save you a lot of time. So just don't be thrown by the testing center itself, and learn to navigate it. And like Nick said, there are opportunities to go through a practice scenario and to go visit the Prometric Center and get an experience of what the test is going to be like, sort of a dry run before you actually have to take the test on test day. Last thing I just want to mention as part of a testing strategy, and I know it may seem silly, but I definitely have seen how it's helped me as I've taken professional tests, and especially the DAT specifically, is sort of preparing like an athlete. You know, most people have played sports of some kind or involved in some sort of athletics, running or some sort, and you've got to treat this just like that. That is a huge part of the strategy. It is a long test, as I mentioned, and you don't want to get burned out. You've got to fuel your brain and your body. Sitting there for that 4 hours plus is brutal on your body. You get tired, you get antsy, you want to move. You may get restless leg syndrome or something, but you got to keep yourself moving, and you got to keep your brain working hard. This is essentially, as it says, this is like your Olympics, right? This is the biggest shot. This is what you spent years working for. You spent late nights studying. You spent, a lot of money, and you've invested a lot of your time and money to get to this point. So don't treat it lightly. I'm a big fan of Gatorade or coconut water. Those things have a ton of electrolytes that can keep you ready to go for the test. And this is where it comes back to that, having that 30-minute break time. Have a game plan when you get out into the break time, right? Know exactly what you're going to go eat. Know exactly how quickly you need to eat. If you need to use the restroom, just have a game plan for that 30 minutes. How much time you have, how much time you can use to drink something or eat something, or have a snack, right? You definitely just want to be prepared. On the same hand, get ready the night before and get ready the morning before. Don't just roll into the test last minute. Show up in enough time to get yourself ready to go. Get a good night's sleep beforehand. Like I said, you just got to treat this like this is the championship game of whatever sport you love, or whatever activity you love. This is the biggest thing you can do, so treat it like that. Like I said, bring snacks for your break time. Eat adequately beforehand so you aren't getting hungry. I'm a huge fan of the theory that chewing gum increases your brain activity. So do all sorts of those little tiny things will make a huge difference when you're actually in the test, and it's something you don't have to think about. If you're sitting there in the last section of the test and all you can think about is how hungry you are or how much you want to go to the buffet after your test or something, you're not going to do as well. But if you're fueled, you have enough energy, your brain's functioning well, you're not going to struggle at all with the test. That being said, as I kind of conclude my testing strategies, the biggest thing I can say is just be confident. That's the biggest strategy you can have, is be confident in yourself, confident that you've put in the work, you've put in the hard time, all the hard effort, and you're going to succeed on that test. Being confident in your abilities and being confident you're going to answer the right question is going to carry you a lot farther than doubting if you put the right answer. If you mark an answer down, go with your gut instinct, because usually it's right, and just be confident that you've answered the questions to the best of your ability, and know that your test score is going to get you into your dream dental school. With that being said, those are all my test taking strategies. I think we're going to try to move into taking some questions from anyone, if there are any.
So I saw that the first question that we were posed is how many questions are on the DAT, so I can certainly handle that one. There are 280 total questions, 100 in the Survey of the Natural Sciences, 90 perceptual ability, 50 reading comprehension, and 40 quantitative reasoning.
Okay. Question 2. Are there any study materials providing video explanations specifically for the quantitative reasoning? So Kaplan, if you choose to do that full course, they do offer video explanations, and then also Crack the DAT provide video explanations. I'm not sure if anybody had experience with other resources that may have provided video solutions.
Not specifically for the DAT questions, but I looked up a lot of similar type questions on Khan Academy, as Carson, or I think was it Carson or Shelley mentioned. Khan Academy is a great one. They explain very well.
So this one's for Shelley. How did you study for the DAT on your, or how long did you study for the DAT on your second attempt? Oh, Shelley, you're muted.
Okay, you can hear me now. I realized really quickly after I took the test the first time that organic was my biggest weakness, and I completely bombed it. So for the second semester of my senior year, I allotted like 2 days a week to just studying for organic. Really, nonchalantly, I would sit on the couch, read a book, do practice problems. But then when I graduated, I studied for a straight month, 5 days a week, like 10 hours a day. And the first time I didn't really like compile a list of notes. I brought my little DAT binder to show that I went crazy this time with the colorful notes and sticky notes and drawings. And but like I said, if you can't sit still like me, then make yourself a binder and just write. And I'm also going to go ahead and just throw question 6 out here. How early should you apply to take the DAT? So once you like apply to take the DAT, you have 6 months to schedule your test. And the first time I took my DAT, I'm a huge planning person, so I was like, okay, I'm going to schedule it now. I'm going to take it in like 5.5 months. Well, I didn't realize that this 6-month rule was a thing. So when it came down to time to take my DAT, I was faced with the option, okay, do I take the DAT and do bad because I feel like I'm going to do bad, or do I not take the DAT and just lose $400 and something? And I ended up taking it. And so don't schedule to take it unless you really know you're going to take it, or else you'll be faced with a similar dilemma.
Okay, so to the presenters who did not retake the DAT, were you confident that you couldn't do better? How do you know if you should retake or not? Clark, did you retake the DAT?
So I took it twice.
Okay. So I personally, I took a whole summer off. I studied one time, and I scored acceptable for me. I think for that, you have to look at what schools you're interested in and what scores are going to be competitive for those schools to decide if you need to retake or not. For me personally, I know I'm in the application cycle right now. If I don't get in, the first thing I'm doing is retake my DAT, because you can always improve that score and you can always score higher. And so I don't think you should ever look at it as, if I get this score, I'm done, just because you can always improve. That's something that you can, if you put your mind to it, you'll do better. So we answered that.
As a follow-up to the retaking the test, I find a lot of times students have the perception that if they retake the test that looks bad to the dental schools. And I don't think that is something that you should necessarily worry about. I think we find, based on people who take the National Board Part 1, that about a third of them took the DAT more than once. So it's certainly not unusual for students to do that, and it's not that's across schools, and people who get into the better perceived dental schools retake the test at the same rate as people who get into the schools that require lower DAT scores.
So when is the best time to take the DAT? How long before applying to dental school? So I personally took the DAT the summer in between my sophomore and junior year, and then I applied in between my junior and senior year. So what that was nice for is I could take off a full summer and just study and take the test. What I will say is that some schools have rules in terms of how long they'll accept a DAT score for. Maybe they'll accept a DAT score that is 2 years old. Maybe they'll accept a score that's 3 years old. So that's something for me, that my score is now a year old that I'm applying with. So if I need to reapply, I'm probably going to have to retake the DAT because my score is going to be too old for some schools. Does anybody else want to share how they, when they took the DAT and how they studied?
I did the same thing. I did summer courses. So to that question asking about how to do it while you're in class, I'll just kind of touch on that really quickly. Like I said, I took the DAT. I studied for the DAT while I was doing summer classes. So I was actually in OChem 2, or the second semester of OChem, while I was studying for the DAT. So I kind of actually felt like being in that class same time prepared me as well. But one material that, using some of the DAT resources, like Coursesaver, for example, helped me study for my class and for the DAT. So I thought that was actually kind of a double kill. I was able to do well in my final and do well in the DAT at the same time, just because I was studying material double almost, if you would. But yeah, I studied for the summer, and then I took it kind of towards the end of the summer of my junior year.
So we had a question about Crack the DAT, and it's, yes, it is an online computer-based program that you would download to your computer. Additionally, there's updates given to you as they refine the questions. How many resources should one person use? Are all the resources you shared necessary? Does anybody want to answer this?
I only used like one of each resource. So I used, I used Bozeman biology videos to review biology on a visual basis, and I used DAT Destroyer to do practice questions, and I used DAT Bootcamp to take practice tests. And I realized that the first time taking the DAT, I used way too many resources. I was trying to do too much, to cover too much. And like I said in my presentation, I think it's important to find just a few that work really well for you. Find, review material, find a question bank, and find some sort of program that's going to allow you to take a lot of practice questions, and just leave it really limited. And if you run out of resources at that point, go find something else. But I think that you'll have plenty to study from if you just pick a few.
I will say, I think we covered a lot of programs that maybe cost money. There's just so many resources out there that are either cheap or free. And so I spent a lot of time looking at, I took a Kaplan course, but then also I read the Feralis Notes, and I did my own thing with the Feralis Notes. So it's, I think, having a general sort of review and then figuring out a way to target those sections that you may be weaker on.
I think on the same note, the first time I took the DAT, I took a Kaplan course, and I found that it gave me a lot of material, but not in the areas where I was maybe weak. So for example, all the materials they gave me were great for biology, but I wasn't very weak in biology. So the second time I took the DAT, I made sure to invest in resources for the areas where I felt I was weak at. So for example, I struggled with the PAT the first time a little bit. So I made sure to buy into Crack the DAT's PAT generator. That was a huge, resources, and I found another generator that made PAT examples. So I think when it comes to resources, I think you need to evaluate where you're strongest at and where you're weakest at. And I would recommend getting resources to compensate for those weaknesses. If you're great at biology, you probably don't need to go out and buy a whole bunch of biology resources. If you're great at OChem, you probably need to go out and buy a whole bunch of OChem resources, but find the areas you're weak at and where you need to improve at.
Our next question, I think Nick will be best able to answer it, and that's how many breaks are given during the test?
Just one. There's the 30-minute break between what we generally call the morning section and the afternoon section. So the first two sections are the survey of the natural sciences and the perceptual ability. And then you get a 30-minute break, and then there's the reading comprehension and the quantitative reasoning. If you are someone who expects that you will need more breaks than that, we do offer accommodations if you have a medical need for more breaks, but just as it is normally delivered, there's only one 30-minute break in between sections.
Okay. So our next question is it a good idea to treat studying like a part-time / full-time job? And how did you all treat that? So I personally, it's more than a part-time job, or it's more than a full-time job, honestly. Laying out that schedule, when I did it, I studied for 3 months, and I maybe did the first month and a half, I took weekends off, and then the last month and a half, I maybe took 1 day off a week. I was doing 8 hours a day plus. So that's a personal thing, but
I was much the same way. Even like I said, I was in classes at the same time. I treated it just like a job. I'd get off my classes and I'd study around the clock. My wife can attest that I was up late many nights just studying for the DAT, going over practice tests late at night and everything. So yeah, you got to treat it like it's either your part-time job if you're in school right now and you're studying for the DAT, or if you're out of school, treat it like a full-time job, 9 to 5.
that kind of follows up with this question here, that how do you recommend studying for the DAT while in school with a full course load? Is there recommended time to spend studying per section? So I would recommend reviewing your practice test scores and seeing what subjects you need to work on. And when I was studying throughout school, I really kind of just allotted like a study hall time or whatever. So in between classes, I would study for the DAT, and I would write in my planner, okay, take a practice test today, and et cetera. And I utilized my professors at school too, especially with general chemistry, having taken that my freshman year, and here I'm taking the DAT, you know, at the end of my junior year. I went to my freshman chemistry teacher and said, listen, like, I don't even remember how to do beta decay. So if you're in school, take advantage of those professors because they know what they're talking about, and it's, you know, less time consuming than trying to figure it out on your own.
Okay, so our next question is, how did you incorporate your notes from classes into your study routine? I personally did not rely on any of the notes that I took in classes. I did not even consider looking back at those. I think that would have been a lot of information to go through.
I started over.
I didn't use anything from my previous classes. I used a few textbooks, but I didn't use any class notes.
It's also important, I know, you know, your classes might go into more detail, or you might spend a whole day learning one topic where, I mean, that might be one question potentially. So I feel like your class notes might not match up best to what's going to be on the actual exam. However,
That same note,
relationship.
if you think, like, for example, organic chemistry, you know, you spend a lot of time drawing electron, transfer and everything, electron push. But it comes to taking the actual test, you just got to be able to recognize what it is. You have to actually draw it out by hand. It's helpful if you can do that, but for example, that's something if you can just recognize it, or you can recognize what the mechanism was, it makes it a lot easier. Whereas in class, you probably went through every individual step, so it might be overkill.
Okay, we have a question here. How can we improve our reading comprehension? So the first time I took the DAT, I made a 17 on reading comprehension, and that's because I didn't really think you needed to study for reading comprehension, and I kind of just was basing how I was going to take the test on people's experiences on Student Doctor Network. There's a method called Search and Destroy where you read the question, you search in the passage, and you answer it. That may have worked really well for other people. I don't know if Carson and Clark used it, but that obviously did not work for me. So the second time I took the DAT, I read every single word of the passage, and that will be time consuming if you're not a fast reader, but I actually ended up with 15 minutes to spare, which is a lot of time, and I made a 25. So my score went up 8 points, which I completely blew my mind with that. So all I could say is practice some reading comprehension tests based on different methods, and just find one that works for you, and use it.
Practicing reading scientific articles as well from academic journals, that helps too. Just kind of familiarizing yourself with difficult reading or complex topics and picking out kind of keywords and things. That helps just increase your reading abilities.
So our next question is, what is your personal recommendation on taking the DAT during your junior or senior year? I think if you're going to take the DAT during your junior and senior year, it's probably best to determine a time where you're going to be the least busy. So whether that's taking the summer off or taking a reduced course load. Does anyone know of any podcasts or things to listen to that will help them study?
There's a series of notes. I cannot remember what they're called right now. How I even got to them on the DAT. There's a series of notes that are for biology that you can get access to for free. I want to say it's through DAT Bootcamp who publicizes them. They give a typed out version, but as of last I saw, they started offering those same notes in audio format. So it's just a guy going through and reading the notes word for word. And so I know when I studied for the DAT, there was a few days where I just downloaded that to my iPhone and I just listened to it. It was pretty monotone. You could listen to 100 pages of biology notes in in less than an hour, just so you can read it. And I want to see those through DAT Bootcamp. I can't remember specifically what it's called, but you can find them on DAT Bootcamp's website.
Okay, do you recommend rewriting the Feralis Notes, even though it's time-consuming? So the Feralis Notes are those free notes that are compiled by a dental student and now available on DAT Bootcamp. I would say that's probably up to you as to whether that's the way you learn. I know personally rewriting really helps me, redrawing, so I think that did help me. But that's up, I mean, it is time-consuming. It took me a couple days to do that.
I
Do you
would
think it's possible? Oh,
sorry.
Shelley?
There's a question here saying, would you recommend taking physiology? And so in my case, I took physiology after the first time I took the DAT and then before the second time. And I think that it helped me. So, if it's required for your major or your minor, take it. But if not, and you don't have the time to take it, then I think that you could learn a majority of the stuff on your own.
So I would say it's definitely necessary to have the biology 1, biology 2, general chemistry 1, general chemistry 2, organic chemistry 1, organic chemistry 2 done before you take the DAT. There's some courses that are helpful, but then there's also some courses that I would say you can learn the material that would come from that course through a review. So like maybe microbiology, you're not going to really need microbiology or biochemistry, but I do think physiology would be one of those that would help.
Evolution, genetics, cell bio.
Do you think it's possible to study really hard in a month and take the DAT? I think that's a personal question that's going to depend on you. I have a friend who did it in very limited time, but she did like 12 hours a day. And she was already brilliant to begin with. So you need to figure out what's best for you in your application.
Yeah, it's just really honestly where you're at. If you already feel like you could kill all the subjects, then you can maybe do it in a month. I would probably take a practice test and see, or a diagnostic and see where you're at.
So our next question, does the DAT score last 3 years? So Nick, is that by school, it's up to their discretion? Nick, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry about that. The ADA doesn't ever consider scores to be expired. It's on a per school basis. The only recommendation that we make to the schools is that they more heavily consider the most recent DAT score, since that's the clearest indication of someone's ability at the current time.
So the next question, and this one's a personal one, so I'm going to allow it to be everybody, if you'd be willing to share your scores on the DAT. I can share with you mine. I scored a 22 academic average, a 22 science average. My lowest score was a 21, and my highest score was a 23 within sections.
My overall was a 21, and or academic average was 21, and my science was a 21.
Right, and first time I made a 17, second time I made a 20 academic average, and my high score was, of course, reading comp 25.
Okay. How many times can you take the DAT?
There is not actually a maximum number of test attempts for the DAT. After you take the test 3 times, you'll have to send in documentation to us proving that you're still actively applying to dental schools, and then once you've taken it 4 times, you can only take it once per 12 months, but technically there's no maximum number of test attempts.
Okay, and then we also had a question about the ADAT. Would you be able to answer that, Nick? What the ADAT is?
Somebody asked whether it would look better if you took the ADAT when applying to dental schools. I would say that would look pretty good to dental schools if you had taken the ADAT, though I don't know how you would get approved to do it. The ADAT is for third-year dental students who are going to be applying to advanced dental education programs, so the postdoc stuff. So I would not worry yet about taking the ADAT.
For each of you, did you get admitted to dental school following your undergraduate schooling? If not, was it solely based on your DAT scores? We're all applying this application cycle.
Mhm.
So we will let you know come December, January, February, March, April, May. I will say I think a solid DAT score really helps you get an interview if you're applying early enough.
Up on that question did also ask, what are you doing during your gap year? I'm in my gap year technically, and I am working, volunteering, still shadowing a little bit, and just, painting to improve my manual dexterity, reading some books, and just relaxing. Don't be too hard on yourself.
I am getting an MBA during my gap year, so.
So this person's asking if 8 to 10 weeks would be sufficient to study. Once again, that's going to be a personal preference. And is July too late if you're applying during the upcoming cycle? I don't think July is definitely too late, but the sooner the better. I don't know if anybody submitted in July here.
I did. I actually submitted my materials in July because I was waiting for my last semester's grades to post. So I submitted my materials in July, and I haven't had any problems so far with time frame of materials being submitted or processed. So I don't think that'd be too late. I wouldn't wait any longer than that. Getting into August kind of gets a little more scary, I guess, or dicey. So I would try. If you took it in July, I would try to get on everything or have everything ready to roll the second the test is done.
You can also submit your application without your DAT score. That's risky, but if you feel confident you'll do good on the DAT, you can submit and then fax your DAT scores in immediately.
Yep.
So are the DAT questions more detailed or less detailed than questions that you're asked in class? I would say they're probably more general, but there's definitely don't get that confused. There's definitely detailed questions, but the detailed questions you'll see in reviews, the detailed questions I felt like I was asked, I was prepared for.
I'd say the difficulty is still just as high, but the amount of detail is less.
Yes, so for the biology section, that's the big detail one. You're going to have Bio 1 and Bio 2, where I go to UF, we have 6 exams over the course of those 2 classes, so each exam is going to be more detailed, but you have to know all the information from all 6 of those exams. So I graduated 2 years ago. I took the in-person Kaplan test. What can I be doing to strengthen my skills based on the materials you received in your class? I would continue, if you haven't taken the Kaplan's practice exams are really good at nailing down your weaknesses, so just focus on those weaknesses and supplement with some other resources. Is anatomy or statistics helpful in preparing for the DAT? So I would say that anatomy isn't necessary, neither is statistics, but with that being said, you want to make sure the math section, don't go into it not having practiced that a couple times because there are statistics questions. But there's generally, I think, a few different types that are considered between my reviews that I took and the actual test. So you're not going to be doing any hardcore statistics, but you're going to need to understand like permutations and all that.
More so probability and permutations, combinations, not so much like a t-test or a z-test, nothing like that.
So Nick, this is an interesting question for you. Are the same questions utilized between the US and the Canadian DAT?
I don't believe so. We certainly don't administer the Canadian DAT, and I know they only do theirs a couple times a year. and it's, I think they still do a paper and pencil test if I remember correctly. So I sincerely doubt it, but I couldn't say for sure.
Were your practice test scores indicative of your actual DAT score?
I think for me, if you do a little bit of shopping around or try different resources, some of the tests are, I think, geared a little more difficult than others. So you kind of got to find one that matches where you think your level is at. There were some tests where I was scoring very high on, and others where I was scoring, where I actually ended up scoring at. So you kind of got to do a little bit of playing around to figure out, I think, which practice tests are more indicative of your actual potential.
So personally, I felt like a lot of my scores were indicative. I might have scored a little bit better on the actual thing. I will say crack the DAT. I ended up getting a course from them, and so I took some of those practice tests, and you have to understand that they're trying to understand the scoring scheme that the ADA uses, and so your scoring might not always be the most accurate, and so definitely take those scores with a grain of salt, because it might be the week before your DAT and you might bomb a section that's usually your strength and start freaking out like I did, but it all worked out. Did anyone use Ari's study schedule?
Intermittently, not 100%. I would sometimes look at it to see what he would have you study that day, but I didn't use it full on 100%.
I didn't use it either.
I did not as well. So our next question is physics important for the DAT? Nick?
Not particularly. I mean, there's certainly not a dedicated physics question like there is for, say, the optometry admission test. So no, I would say not particularly.
Okay, and then our next question is, how soon do you get your results for the DAT?
Right away.
Immediately. You get a printout of your scores at the test center. We consider those unofficial scores because we audit all of the scores before they're technically released, but in all my time with the ADA, no one's scores have ever changed between what they got at the test center and then what was released 2 to 3 weeks later. So you get your scores right away.
Okay, our next question is, what does the quantitative reasoning cover? Trigonometry, calculus, algebra, etc. Question. So there's definitely algebra in there. There's some trigonometry. There's statistics, no calculus. I believe that's correct.
That is correct.
So something to remember with the quantitative reasoning is, because you have such a limited amount of time, that you might not get a more difficult question, but then also a lot of these questions have the ability to kind of work through them and maybe figure out shortcuts. Some questions will take you very little time, like Clark said, and some will take you a long time. So there's not going to be anything too terribly long, but maybe something that requires more ingenuitive thinking to answer it quickly.
Like I said, mental math, if you can get your mental math up, that'll save you a ton of time. Working that calculator, unless you get really proficient at it, can be difficult and can be time consuming. So either get your mental math up or just kind of get good at working out problems quickly on the whiteboard. It'll save you a lot of time. Like Carson said, there's shortcuts to a lot of those math questions. Plugging answers back into the question will save you a lot of time and sitting there struggling. So look at what your options are for answers and try to see if you can plug it in back into the question, solve a little bit faster.
Okay, how were you able to block out any distractions during your study time? Shelly, do you want to answer that?
Sure. You just have to learn to be disciplined and really learn to say no. If you are not used to, saying no to people in college when they're like, oh, come on, let's hang out. Just learn to prioritize things, and if you need a social break and you need a distraction, then take it. But definitely learn to be disciplined and what's important and what's not as far as studying for the DAT, because ultimately you know, the DAT is very important. And then if you're meeting distractions, you know, in a room, for say, go to the library. Library is a good place to be.
You're going to always wish you would have studied more. I don't think anyone who's ever, unless you scored a 30 on the DAT, I think everyone always wishes, I wish I would have studied more, I would have spent more time doing something. Even if you score great, like Carson did or any of us, you always wish you would have studied more, I think. So just look at it, like we said, like a job and an investment. This is for your dream career. Like, do you want to study hard now, or do you want to retake it again?
You don't want to retake it. It's expensive.
Okay. I believe we're going to pass it back to Brian for some closing remarks.
I'd like to thank all the panelists on a great webinar, and thank you the attendees for attending. To help us evaluate this program and the need for future programs, we'll be sending out a brief survey. We would appreciate it if you could take a few minutes to fill this out. This webinar has been recorded, and all registrants will receive a link to access the recording by the end of next week. Pre-dental month continues through October. Join us for webinars on paying for dental school, scholarships, interviewing, and non-traditional paths to dental school. You can register at the URL at the bottom of the screen, and don't worry, all the emails and URLs that I mentioned in these slides will be on the last slide, so don't worry about jotting them down in a rush. We encourage you to join the American Student Dental Association as a pre-dental member. Pre-dental membership offers a wealth of benefits geared to help you get into dental school. As a special incentive, join now and your membership will be extended through 2018. That's 3 additional months of membership for the cost of $68 a year. We still have a few spaces left for ASDA's National Leadership Conference, November 17th to the 19th in Chicago. For the second year, ASDA will have a 3-day track exclusively for pre-dentals with topics including admissions, DAT preparation, interviewing, personal statement, and hands-on workshops. New this year, we will have 2 morning sessions where attendees can meet with students from every U.S. dental school. We hope you'll join us for this special event. Please like us on Facebook at Facebook.com/ASDA Predental. Here you will find national and local event information, pre-dental tips, and resources. And then lastly, participate in ASDA's Pre-Dental Month Instagram contest. Tag @dentalstudents and use the hashtags ASDA Pre-Dental Month and the weekly theme to enter. Thank you all again, and everyone have a great night.